We're going to have a tough conversation about the Cowboys today. We are talking trade deadline, but not in the way you think. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with quick-hitting videos such as this one. Welcome into the show. We're talking trade deadline, but not in the way you think. And what I mean by that is I've seen people talk about, hey, maybe the Cowboys should go get, or should have gone get, Devontae Adams, who obviously is now a New York Jet. There are some people talking about, hey, why not reunite with Amari Cooper? He's now a Buffalo Bill. All of those, they don't matter as much anymore. But the Cowboys were never going to trade for a superstar. They were always, if anything, they were going to go do some more of a Jonathan Hankins type trade when they acquired him at the deadline. It was going to always be more similar to that than the Amari Cooper trade in 2018, if you know what I mean. The Cowboys were not going to make a splash. If anything, they were going to move for depth, or they were going to go get a defensive tackle because they badly need a defensive tackle. And maybe that was going to be the move of the 2024 season. Maybe, just maybe. They might still do it, actually, because the deadline is November 5th. Still a long way to go, so they might still do it. However, I am here to talk about, and you can let me know in the chat if you agree or disagree in the comments down below. The Cowboys might have to be sellers. We might be wrong about the kind of trade that the Cowboys should be looking into. And you might be thinking, Mo, stop. It is way too early for that. The Cowboys are 3-3. They still have a shot at being a playoff team. We should be buyers. We should be going all in. That's what they said. All that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be honest with you. The Cowboys are not guaranteed to be in the playoffs. In fact, as of today, it would officially be a surprise for them to make it to the postseason. And that is because if you bet Cowboys will make the playoffs, you will get plus money, whatever you bet. Because officially right now in the betting world, they're expected to miss out in the postseason. I want to start with that disclaimer because that's in big part what led me to having this discussion with you. The Cowboys have the 49ers and they've got the Atlanta Falcons before the trade deadline because it got pushed back a week. Remember, before it was right after week 8. Now it is right after week 9. So it's 2 ball games for Dallas, which they could realistically lose. You could lose both to the 49ers and you could lose to the Atlanta Falcons. That's the reality that we live in. The Cowboys might have to pull off an upset to get a win in either of these 2 games. That is important to note because if we get there, if we get to week 9 and the Cowboys record by the end of it is 3-5, you might be in seller's territory. And before we get to some of the names that I want to get into that I think the Cowboys could sell, I want to explain the biggest reason why I'm having this conversation with you. The biggest reason why I believe we should have it is that despite Jerry's all-in comments, and heck, I will go one step further, because of Jerry Jones's comments, you kind of easily get the impression that behind the scenes, this is being treated as a rebuild year. And sure, what I mean by that is, at first he was talking about an all-in. When he explained what he meant by an all-in, he talked about doing more with less. He talked about everyone being on a 1-year deal, including Dak Prescott at the time. Obviously, since then, he's been extended. But Jerry Jones was never talking about spending big money in free agency. His vision for an all-in was, we'll just go in there, we're going to play a high-stakes season, and then after that, we might just blow it up. Because Mike McCarthy is not under contract for 2025, and Mike McCarthy is very likely out of the picture by the end of the 2024 NFL season or after the end of the 2024 NFL season. So honestly, this seems like it's being treated as a rebuild where you've got $20 million in free agency spending dead last in the NFL by a wide margin too, especially when you look at the average spending teams in the league. They didn't spend money other than in contracts for the future, right? Because that was already under contract. The extension happened because of the future. Same goes for CD. They have to pay Micah Parsons. It kind of seems to me that they're treating this as a rebuild year. Now, I would wish that if that is what we're doing, then the Cowboys have to be proactive, and then they have to optimize their resources to be good in 2025 and beyond. Because if you're doing a rebuild, the end goal is to be good after that year. And if you look at this roster, there's not a lot of tradable assets, I believe, but there are some players that could give you something solid in return. And I'm going to get into some of the names here that you might like, you might not like. And I'm going to start with the biggest name of all, the one that is in the graphic right now, the one that is in the thumbnail. I got to go with Osa Odighizuwa. Now, you might hit an alarm button right now and be like, Mo, are you freaking kidding me? The one defensive tackle that we've got, and you want to deal him away? This is in this scenario that the Cowboys are truly treating this as a rebuild season, and you're trying to maximize your assets. And I'm going to tell you something. Osa Odighizuwa is gonna cash in next offseason, whether it's with the Cowboys or whether it's with somebody else. We know how the Cowboys feel about the defensive tackle position, for better or worse. They're not going to spend a lot of money in it. They're not going to use a lot of resources in it. That's why them drafting Mazi Smith, a nose tackle in the first round, was so shocking to us. And the fact that it isn't quite working out makes me think even more that they're not going to be spending a lot of money in Osa Odighizuwa, not when they have to also pay Micah Parsons, and they might end up paying DeMarcus Lawrence, who is also hitting free agency. And by the way, the list of 2025 free agents is long. So I'm just saying, Osa getting done in 2025, getting a deal done with the Cowboys, not that likely. It could happen, and I'm sure we'll get those conversations when we get there. But if you as a front office already know it's going to be tough to pay Osa, and you're treating this as a rebuild season, and you're 3-5, and you don't think you can make the playoffs, he's going to be the player that gives you the most value, the most return in a trade. Because the rest of the players that we're going to talk about, they're not as good as Osa. Osa is going to be the biggest name that we get into today. The other players are more than anything depth, and they're more than anything upside kind of players. Osa Odighizuwa has been a very solid 3 technique at his position. He's not been in that upper echelon so far, right? He's not up there with the Chris Joneses of the world, or the Dexter Lawrences, or the Aaron Donalds, right? He's more in that second tier, third tier, even top of the third tier, I would argue at worst. Osa Odighizuwa might just land you, say, a 4th round draft pick. He might for a contender. Let me read you some of the contenders that are going to be looking for defensive linemen that I've got here. San Francisco 49ers. I've got the Tampa Bay Bucks, the Minnesota Vikings. All of this are NFC opponents that are going to be looking for some firepower at defensive tackle. So moving Osa sounds like a very strong take. It sounds like a very impossible and outrageous idea. But if we're talking about maximizing your value, if you are looking at this as a rebuild year, and that is a big if, because we don't know how the Cowboys will balance that, because it might be that, hey, we are treating it as a rebuild year, but if we move on from Osa, it will get so bad that it will be an irrelevant season, and we don't want to do that. That might be the most likely stance from the Cowboys. They want to be talked about. They don't want to be completely done. So they might cling in to some of the hope, and they might not move on from Osa again, because they're not that proactive, right? They want to be somewhere in the middle. They want to be relevant, but they're not going to take risks as big as that one, maybe. But I'm just going to say Osa Odighizuwa should be on the list. He really should. But I've got some other names, man. But before we get into all of those, let me talk to you about our friends over at Texas Card House. Guys, if you play poker, you gotta join the premier poker experience at Texas Card House, where the thrill of the game meets the excitement of the community. And I say this every day. You play poker, you know how important it is to play within the right community. You can visit any of their 6 Texas locations, highlighting the Dallas and Las Colinas venues, Texas Card House offers a unique blend of luxury, sophistication, and camaraderie for poker aficionados. Whether you are a seasoned pro or just starting out, join a welcoming community at a top-notch facility located near you. And if you go on Tuesdays, you know what that means. $2 Tuesdays, $2 draft beers, or if you cannot make it on Tuesday, you can check out Lowball Happy Hour every single day from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. So check out Texas Card House. It is the right choice to go play some poker, man. Awesome experience over there. Got to check it out. Some other names that I've got, and by the way, link is in the description below if you want to check that out. Some other names that I wanted to talk about to you about. Linebacker, man. I've got a linebacker in here. I've got Damone Clark. Sorry about the bad pronunciation there. Clark could be an interesting trade candidate, man. He did start 17 games for the Cowboys last year, which is insane to think about now that he's been clearly benched by the Cowboys. But Clark did play last week, and he was one of the better performance versus the Lions. I know we didn't like anything about that Lions game, but Clark was one of the standouts, kind of. Had some bad moments here and there, sure, but mostly he played a solid ball game. Damone Clark could interest somebody. Obviously, there was the health stuff coming out of the draft, but he's clearly over that, or appears to be, and he's played the position a good chunk now, and he played the green dot role last year too, so it just kind of makes sense for a team that needs a linebacker, maybe like the Green Bay Packers, another NFC contender, that maybe they want some depth there, maybe they want some brains in that position. Damone Clark could be the right choice. So I'm just going to put him out there. Obviously, the compensation wouldn't be nearly as high as what you would get from somebody like Osa, but I just wanted to put this guy's name on the table there. And then I would move on to safety, where I've got two players. One of them, essentially a starter in 2023, not exactly the same, because obviously he played linebacker in 2023 under Dan Quinn, and now he's back at safety. But Marquise Bell showed everyone that he belongs on an NFL field. He was the highest graded linebacker in coverage last year, and he is a good tackler, right? Maybe when he was a linebacker, we didn't love him because obviously he was not built for the position, but he's a good tackler. He's been solid in coverage. And he's just not on the field because of Malik Hooker. I thought about the UFC guy. I don't know why. Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson. But Marquise Bell is somebody that has proven that he belongs on an NFL football field. So if there is a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another NFC contender, that might want some DV help, and I know the Bucs need some safety help, they might look into somebody like Marquise Bell, who is pretty versatile. And then Juan J. Thomas also goes in that bucket. We've seen Juan J. Thomas play some football, and we've seen an NFL player. And yet, he's got a 7% snap count for the 2024 season. And again, it ties directly into the Cowboys having Malik Hooker and them having Donovan Wilson. They like those two guys. I'm not against them starting, by the way, even though Wilson has had some rough moments this season. But I don't mind playing them. The Cowboys are paying them on top of that. So it seems like Juan J., like Marquise Bell, they're never going to be promoted in that depth chart. So my logic here is if you get someone to give you anything for Juan J. Thomas, for Marquise Bell, doesn't it make sense to move on from one? If we're talking about the future, if we're talking about rebuilding, I wouldn't be against it. And I think the Cowboys shouldn't be either, if that is what they're thinking so far this season. And one name, but not least, maybe a difficult one to move, but I guess we got to talk about Trey Lance. I guess we have to. I don't think the compensation would be great. In fact, I think it would be quite poor because it's not like he's exactly cheap, and he's not under contract beyond 2024. But if there is a team out there that might want to shake things up at the quarterback position, maybe like the Raiders, Trey Lance might be on the move. Or maybe if another injury happens at QB before the deadline, There's always conversations about, okay, which QBs are available. I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Lance comes up in those conversations. I don't think the Cowboys would get a lot. And I'm talking like a 7th rounder, and not even from 2024, but he could be moved before the deadline. I'm not going to act like he's not going to be able to move. The Cowboys shouldn't want him, right? They already paid Dak, so that conversation is over. They clearly don't like him enough because he's still the healthy scratch QB behind Cooper Rush. So the Cowboys don't really believe in Trey Lance, if we're being honest. Let's just get anything in return from Trey Lance at this point. Let me know in the comments, how do you feel about this? Do you agree or do you disagree that the Cowboys should be looking to make a move in the seller side of things? Or do you think they should be buyers? Let me know what you think. I think there's an argument to be made about both sides. They're stuck in the middle right now. My question is, what do they really believe they've got? And what was the initial goal since the offseason for this team? Because it sounds to me that they've been talking about this smooth rebuild for a good while now. And now we're seeing the results of it at 3-3, and a team that is not expected, by the betting world at least, to make the postseason. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button for me. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Maybe not live because I'm going to be on the road, but we're going to have something for you, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. Bye-bye.